Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Burnt Pancakes podcast, where we have honest conversations about motherhood, marriage, and all the messy middle in between. I'm your host, Katie Fensky, and I remind moms that everyone burns their first pancake. In today's episode, we're talking about something that doesn't get highlighted enough in our culture, and that's lasting love and marriage. I'm joined today by Jodie Howard. She has been married for over 30 years. She's a mom of four, including a daughter with cerebral palsy, and the co-host of Higher Love, the podcast. Jodie has navigated military life as a Navy spouse for 28 years, interracial marriage since the early 90s, raising children 17 years apart, and the kind of adversity that could easily pull a couple apart, but instead deepen their connection. What I love about Jodie is that she doesn't just talk about love in theory. She lives it. She speaks so beautifully about re-choosing your partner daily, staying emotionally intimate over the decades, and growing as an individual without growing apart from the person you married. Whether you're married, single, in the thick of parenting, or just hoping for a love that lasts, this conversation is really going to encourage you. Jodie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I always think it's really important for myself, especially as a woman, to talk to other women who have kind of gone before me. So I'm really happy you're here to talk to us about marriage and relationships and how we navigate all of this. So why don't you start? Just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, great. I'm Jodie Howard. And as far as what I do, I am actually a Reiki master teacher. So I deal in the world of Reiki and energy healing. I'm also an author. My husband and I have co-written a book about relationship and marriage called Choosing Each Other Every Day. And I'm also in the works. I've written some children's books that I am working on getting out into the world and published. So those are kind of my main things that I'm working on outside of my home. And then within my home, my husband and I have been together for almost 35 years, been married for 33 plus. Gosh, yeah, that
All
math
starts to run together, right? We're at the age now where I'm like, is it 15
I know,
or
I'm like,
16? What are we now? I thought I would never lose count, but yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. And we are parents to four kids. Our oldest is 34. We have a daughter. And then we have a son who's 28. And then we have another daughter who's 25. And then our baby girl who is just turned 16.
Oh my
So
goodness.
a huge house full of perspective is what I like to call it, with that age gap of 17 years basically between my first and my last. It's definitely a perspective.
Right, right. Oh my gosh, I love that. Are any of your kids married?
No, not yet.
Okay.
None of them are
Not that they
married
need to
yet.
rush into it. It's fine.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay. You talk about re-choosing each other every day. Can you take us through like a real life moment when you felt like things were hard, and what it looked like to choose each other?
Absolutely. We talk a lot about this, my husband and I, when in our book, obviously, and in our podcast, but which I forgot to mention the podcast, but anyways, we can talk about that. But it really is that act of re-choosing each other, right? And there are times when we've been through a lot, as any couple who's been together for any length of time can say, and having children throws that into the mix. He was in the military. My husband was in the military for 28 years, so the military aspect was a lot. But when I think about the re-choosing, something that really jumps out was honestly when our third daughter, she has cerebral palsy. She was diagnosed with cerebral palsy not till she was about 6 years old. But the process of going through that together, and times when it was just really challenging on each of us because we were processing in different ways in different times, literally. Um, but holding space for each other and allowing us to be okay with what we were doing, and allowing us to, when one of us needed to break down or when one of us needed to have it put it together or act like we were kind of just moving through things or going through the motions, still being able to choose that, some of that hurt together, even like choosing going through that process together and being vulnerable with each other. And so vulnerability is a choice, I think, at times. And it's really tricky because that's one of the hardest things to do and be, especially when you're, trying to forge this family and your careers and the relationship. And when your partner is maybe having a moment or isn't, because that was one of the big things for me, is that I always wanted him to be more vulnerable with me. But that was something I had to choose also, was choosing to step into that space of vulnerability, or choosing to say to him, you aren't being vulnerable enough right now. And I need more from
Mm.
you. Um, so that's kind of a big one. But then there's little things, right? Day in and day out, where I was watching recently on, whether it was on TikTok or Instagram, where there was this trend about couples who, when they're mad at each other, still doing kind things for each other. And I think that's a choice too, right? That I'm annoyed with you. You did something that really bothered me last night or yesterday, or I felt that you were being, I don't know, insincere or something, but I am still doing daily act of kindness because the love is greater than those momentary, or even sometimes it's more than moments of the discord and the disconnect, and still choosing to do those little things of greater kindness, because knowing that's the end game. That's the bigger picture that we're really all here for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so after 30 plus years of marriage, people would think like, oh, you've got a successful marriage, like you've made it through the hard parts. What would you say is the season that stretched your relationship the most? And what did that teach you about being a partner?
Definitely that space, what I was talking about with having, a child with significant special needs, and at that
Mhm.
window of time when we just didn't know a lot. This was,
Mhm.
25 years ago, and she wasn't diagnosed, like I said, till she was almost 6. And so it's universal, though, in the fact that each of our children have had different windows and seasons of their lives when they have needed things that we weren't necessarily feeling prepared for or expected. And we're always approaching it so differently because we are so different, and how we show up and how we process and how we problem solve and how we show even sometimes attention and affection. And so really being in a space of, it's okay that he's doing it differently. It's okay that he's not showing up exactly how I am right now. And he's showing up in a different way, and trusting that he was, and knowing that he was, because for a long time, if he didn't do it like me, whether that was grieving or even driving to soccer practice,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was
that is
like,
so true. Yeah.
he's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, because then somehow that reflected on me, right? Or it made me think, well, wait a minute, if he's doing it differently, does that mean I'm doing it wrong? And there wasn't a wrong way there. It just was how we were doing it. And so allowing ourselves to really feel into that, and it still comes up. You would think, like you said, we've been doing this for so long, but there's a whole nother conversation about like raising quote unquote adult children, right? Or being in space with your adult children, which is super fun and super exciting, but also brings its whole level of different stressors and things you aren't expecting, transitions and jobs and
Right.
relationships and things that it's like, oh wow, we're still playing this game and still navigating it as we go, and doing it very differently as a couple, and yet finding some of that common ground of, it's okay that we do it so differently, and seeing how we complement each other and how that's actually a strength, that we come at things from such different directions.
Mm. So parenting doesn't end when they move out and they leave the house.
No, not yet, at least for
But in a
us.
way, I'm like relieved about that because I'm like, I don't want them to just not need me at
That's just
18,
not,
when they're, yeah,
yeah.
I
No, I
like
mean,
that.
I think, and something that we cultivated was always a close family relationship, right? Where their communication lines are always open, no matter what the thing is we need to talk about. It's going to be messy, right? I would tell my kids, especially when they were teenagers, there's going to be tough conversations. I don't want to have it. You definitely don't want to have it.
Mhm.
They're going to be messy things, but that can't stop us from being there for each other and being in conversation and connection with each other. And like I told my adult children, now we're both adults. We both choose into what we want this adult relationship to look like. Because I know from how my relationship is with my parents, it's definitely still a parent child experience at times, where I was like, we get to decide, as to my adult children, like we get to decide how much we interact with each other, how much we connect with each other, And you're as much of a part of that now as I was. I used to, I drove it for 18 plus years, when you went through college, but now when you're off into the world, it's a mutual decision. And so that does become then part of it is then now you are part of their world, which is exciting. And you're like, oh, wow, there's such big things that they are dealing with as adults. And
Mhm.
you just get to watch them do it and have to really let them go through most of that, which can be super challenging. And yet, that's what is required for them to move into adulthood, right? And move into the
Mhm.
space of their own ownership of their choices and their decisions and their lives.
Watching them make mistakes and letting them go.
Yes.
Okay, so you talked about how it was important to create a closer relationship with your family. So one
Mhm.
was through talking. What else? I mean, I always want to see when I see a family whose kids are like close as adults, I'm like, what did they do? Like, I want to know that. So how did you promote like family closeness?
Um, Definitely prioritizing that space of communication and lines are always open. And also talking to my children very frankly for us having one of our children with significant special
Hmm.
needs, she requires full support. She needs somebody to assist her walking, down the hall. If she out in the world, she uses a wheelchair or a walker, but around our house, she can get through the spaces with some support and assistance. So
Hmm.
there's a constant conversation around, or there was, who's helping her come down the stairs, or is somebody sitting with her while she eats because somebody needs to cut her food for her. And so it kind of created one of the many, many blessings that she has brought, her name is Rosie, into our lives is this nucleus, this family connection of supporting each other. And so I think it's finding ways, because I know not everybody has a Rosie in their life,
Yeah.
finding ways to have your children rely on each other as a family unit and it be sort of also they have their connection and then we have ours as a family, but really fostering ways that they support each other and ways they talk to each other. Where like my 16-year-old now loves to have conversations with her 33-year-old big sister and her big brother about teen stuff and life. And I
Hmm.
welcome that and I
Love
encourage
that.
that because
Yeah.
I'm not the one who has all those answers. I'm much further removed from it than
Yeah.
they are. They remember their high school experience a lot better than I do at this point.
Hmm.
And kind of stepping out of that way and not feeling like I need to be the facilitator of that and really need to know everything that's being discussed, but allowing that trust of they can talk to each other. They have this great moral compass and they do rely on each other. And just continuing to foster that is, I think, little steps, little choices throughout the years and days of also responsibility for each other and connecting as a family that we're kind of in this together.
Yeah.
And how do we want to move through this world as a nucleus, as a family, and continuing that into adulthood?
Right. Okay, one of the things I heard you mention before was accepting that your husband did things differently. So some people say like you can't change a man. What would be like your advice to someone who like feels like his behavior needs to change, but
Mm-hmm.
you you can't change him. But then if nothing changes, like how do you deal with that situation where you're like, I can't stand the way he does this, or
As an
like he
XYZ.
he doesn't communicate or he doesn't have emotions. I want him to be emotional, but that's not who he is. So how do you
Yeah,
navigate that?
that is a great question. And I think I've navigated it differently through our marriage. There have been times when I've been more graceful about it, and other times when I've been like, you just need to get your act together. I don't know what's happening here when we were younger. And I felt that he really did need to communicate better, let's say, or at all in certain situations. But at the end of the day, the hardest part that I realized was I just needed to come back to me and my processing and how
Mhm.
I was working through something, whether it was, let's say, something with one of our kids, it could be even like, I don't know, something at school that happens. It doesn't have to be, anything. And how I would want him to show up and then talk about it with me later. And I had to get to a point where I needed to be okay with how I was processing it. And I could say things to him. Then, like, once I kind of went through my process, I just need you to hear me say this. I just need you to listen. I need you to hold space for me, which he's like, what the heck does that mean? I'm like, I don't want you to solve this. He really likes clear, and I think it is getting to know your partner, right? And
Right.
he needs clear, direct guidance, period. And he's very open to that now. And I
Yes.
want him to figure things out without me having to say anything. Um, and so it's trying to find little ways to meet in the middle. But ultimately, when I started to go through my own healing process, let's say, even with our daughter with special needs and figuring out where things were going to land and what was our life going to look like, I knew he was hurting and processing in his own way. And as much as I wanted him to share all of that with me all the time, that's just
Mhm.
not who he is. And so I realized part of that was I then just started to go through my own healing process and my own figuring this out. And it was interesting how when I was able to take care of myself more, I felt like he somehow would find a way to show up more for me. And whether that was because I no longer need to, I don't know, I wasn't outsourcing it. I wasn't
Right.
outsourcing
Right.
all of that to my partner.
Mhm.
Um, and there are some things, just the other day, he told me that he has changed in 35 years. When I first met him, he had to have the TV on all the time, like when we were going to sleep or whatever. Now, this was long before like social media or any kind of like
Mhm.
handheld device was keeping you company, right? So, I was like, I can't do this. I can't sleep like this. I can't figure this out. And so we kind of got to a point where he was deployed and he would leave for long periods. I was like, whatever, you do what you need to do, as it was his like company, it would keep him company, the
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
But it caused trouble for me. And so here we are 35 years later, and he went on a trip last week for work, and he said that the TV in his hotel room didn't work, and he didn't do anything about it. He actually was able to sit there and just not have his TV
He
on and
can
not, and I
change.
thought, he can change. And 35 years later, I was like, wait a minute.
Why didn't you try that 30 years ago?
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, but how fun that could be like a running joke for you now. Like you can take something that like irritated me and it's like, let's just laugh it off.
Let's
And
just laugh it off.
yeah,
Yeah.
like finding
Yeah,
something.
definitely. And years ago also we kind of fell into this book by Ariel Ford called Wabi Sabi Love, where she has you take a minute. Wabi Sabi is the idea of falling in love with the imperfection. And
Oh.
it's this idea of, when you see this beautiful ancient vase, and instead of looking at all the detail of the vase, there's this huge crack that runs through it. And that's actually what makes it so unique. That's what makes it so powerful and special. And so when you can start to look at your partner through the lens of wabi sabi, all their quirks,
Mhm.
annoyances, whatever it is, you recognize that's what makes them them. Like my husband loves to fold dirty laundry. It doesn't make any sense to me, but any piece of laundry he sees, maybe it's the military man in him, he will fold it if it's on the floor. And I said, well, which one is clean? Which one needs to be put away? And which, because it's all been folded. And so that really was like one of those, like, just things
Uh-huh.
that drove me so crazy for so long. And now when I see the folded dirty laundry, I just, like you said, I just kind of chuckle, and it just makes me think it's a little endearing that he actually
Mhm.
still folds dirty laundry. And it doesn't make sense to me, but I can at least just chuckle about it rather than it becoming this annoyance that puts me into this tailspin of why is
Right.
he making more work for me? Now I got to smell the thing to figure out if it's clean or dirty. Now I've got,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
switching that perspective just that little bit can make a huge difference with some of those little bits of friction within a relationship for
Right.
sure.
Oh gosh, yes.
Sure.
I totally see that. When we first got married, my husband's very, very neat and tidy. So it surprised me that he would just leave his dishes in the sink and it used to irritate me so much. And I'm not a confrontation person. I like to just keep it all in and let it stew and not talk about it. I learned later, I was like, you know what? Instead of just being annoyed by this, I could take 2 seconds and just put it in the dishwasher
Yeah.
and just not like be
Even
bothered by it.
anything
Like, oh,
about it.
he left his dish there. Either I could say, hey, just by the way, I kind of like the sink empty. Would you
Mhm.
mind putting it in there instead of that?
Mhm.
But like for weeks, I'd be like, oh my God, he leaves all his dishes in the sink. They need to be in the dishwasher instead of just being like, there you go. I can do
There you
that for
go.
you.
That
Easy.
easy. Yes, I
Right?
feel that
I love it.
for
I
sure.
love the wabi sabi. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, Wabi Sabi Love by Ariel Ford.
Love it. I'm looking that up.
Yeah.
Okay, switching to the military side. Okay, so he was probably deployed for long periods. And I know a
Absolutely.
lot of moms, like if you're a fire wife or your husband works crazy hours, like my husband used to work, well, he still does, but he would when the kids were little, he wouldn't get home till like 8:30 from his job. So by that time, like the kids are already asleep. So I felt like I was doing it all while he was working. How did you handle those long days of like, it's all on my shoulders, like the kid raising?
Um, the interesting part is when he was gone, when I knew there was that mind shift switch, when he would deploy for 7 or 8 months, strangely enough, it was easier than when we moved to where we are now in Virginia. We moved and he worked at the Pentagon, and he had these crazy long days where he would leave, the house at 4:30
Mhm.
a.m. and not be home until 8:30 p.m.
Mhm.
That was so much harder because I had this expectation, unfortunately, of my partner is in my house. He should be assisting me with all of these things. When he was gone, for long stints, I could just kind of switch to I've got it. I can only rely on me. So that's not necessarily the best either. What I would know now is putting in a lot more support than I allowed myself to at the time. At the time, I had military spouses and wives who we would
Mhm.
definitely help each other out. But I would definitely do a lot more now outsourcing of support. And that's what I definitely do, whether it's support with, groceries or,
Mhm.
support around the house, ways that I recognize I was depleting myself in so many ways, always being the sole person who was doing all the things. And the other truth was it just got to this point for me where I just kind of flipped that switch and I'd be like, okay, I've got this. I'm in this. I was exhausted. And yet I just would move forward. And so
Mhm.
now it would be, I would take more time for myself if I could, whether it's just little pockets of time in the day, whether it's making sure. I mean, I did have very strict, like, bedtime is bedtime, and I needed to have at least an hour where I did not see a child.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
had very structured things that for me, I knew I needed. And until my kids, even like during the summer, until my kids were, I don't know, they were still in school age, I would make them take, you know, quiet time, an hour to an hour and a half in the afternoon in the summer. And they
Jeez.
would just go to their rooms. And again, this
Mhm.
was before they had any devices. So they would read, they would play. I didn't care what it was, but they needed to stay in that space so that I could just have an hour in the middle of the day for myself. So I would do things like that. And it did help for sure for my making it through all of those long days without any extra additional support. But I would add in more support now is
Right.
one of the things I more support, not just the structure around them, but more support for me and whatever that might look like, and taking time for me and whatever that would be something I would definitely add in more now in hindsight.
Right. That's something I would say too. I need to learn to ask for help. Like the other day, I was
Yes.
like, oh, shoot, I've got this kid needs to be here and this kid needs to be here. And my mom is like always willing to help. So I like had her do this, but I was like, she's out of town. What am I going to do? And my husband's like, why didn't you ask me? I could work from home that day. And I'm like, but I think I got to do it
I've
all.
got to do
And
this,
you
right?
forget, like, oh, I can ask you for help.
Yeah.
And even
Asking
if
for
you
help.
couldn't do it, at least knowing that you are like part of that like decision making or
Right.
trying to find it. Was it
Yeah.
an adjustment when he came back? Because it was
Yes.
like I ran the show and now
Yes.
he's back and it's like, wait, who's
Yeah,
running this
absolutely.
now?
Absolutely. And that was something that we had to discover on our own after the first or second deployment. The first deployment, we only had one child and she was so young that we didn't quite feel it. But then
Mhm.
as we got to school age and like actual real parenting, more kind of decisions were being made. The first few times he would come home and he suddenly showed up like dad and taking charge. And I had to say, time out. You have not been here for
Right.
6, 7, 8 months.
The shock to our system.
Yeah, you need to ease in. And that's what we learned was that he learned to ease into our world. And as exciting as it was that daddy was home and we were all happy about his energy, he learned to kind of pace himself and assess the situation and figure out, and talk to me about, okay, why have we been doing it this way? Or what were your thoughts on that without it feeling? And I had to get to a place where he wasn't trying to be judgy. He was just actually curious because he did want to know, where can he jump in? Where's a space that
Mhm.
he can be a part of this family and this household again? Because it really does, when you take it all on yourself, you get to that point where you're so independent and you're thinking, I don't need them. And so on my end, it was also, okay, where he wants to be wanted, he wants to be
Yeah.
needed, as we all
Yeah.
do in family
Mhm.
and relationships. So where there's spaces that I am, once again, not asking for the help that he's actually ready and willing to provide. And
Mhm.
where can I soften that for myself? So it definitely was a transition when he would come back, and we kind of had to figure that out for sure.
Yeah. What about the roommate mode? Because I feel like a lot of our listeners, myself included, like we are so busy with our kids that you kind of get to the point where you're like, oh, yeah, we're in a marriage too. We're not just roommates. How do you navigate that phase?
Definitely there are different seasons. And I think that's important to recognize, right? When you're in a relationship of seasons, especially of a young family, that the constantness and the exhaustion of it. So for us, there were different phases and different things we would do. Sometimes it was actually scheduling date night in or intimacy night
Mhm.
in. We started to like Tuesday night because weekend would kind of make sense, but like during the week, it just felt like this vast like exhaustion and this desert field of like,
Mhm.
do we actually ever connect or see each other in any sort of way out of passing this kid or feeding that kid or
Yeah.
making these work plans or whatnot. Um, so I was always a fan of scheduling things, and my husband didn't love that as much. He wanted everything to be super spontaneous, and I was like, listen,
It needs
that's
to be
not
on
where
the calendar.
it needs to be on the calendar. And it sounds a little unromantic. And yet there were seasons of time that was the way to then get in that groove where then we started to look forward to Tuesday evenings, whether that was because we did put the kids to bed early and we would just sit and talk, or we would actually, do things, and we would have kind of a rule of we're not talking about the kids in this window. Like this is the other thing. We're going to use this time to just talk about us, reconnect, have things that we can do that just are something, our dreams, our hopes, like where do we see things going, and creating really important pockets of time. And I think in today's busyness that is happening, it's really important to find time to do that. And it doesn't always have to
Mhm.
be a date night out, because not everybody has
Yeah.
resources or the management or the energy to like get dressed up and go out,
Mhm.
but you can do it in your own house, and you can do it in a space. For a while there, we also then did date night in where we would have, and that wasn't every week, but a couple of times a month where we would have dinner together, just us, and we would sit at the table and just have dinner together. And the kids would be downstairs on a movie, or we'd wait until a little bit later till they were out of the picture completely. And we'd be like, again, you do not get to come in this space. We were really clear with them. This is unless somebody is bleeding or something is broken, or,
Yeah.
you need to figure it out. And the three or four of you, however many we had at home at the time, we'd be like, you guys figure this out. And we need this time. And I think it's important for our children to see that and see that we were creating time for ourselves. And it was
Mhm.
very clear that they did not actually get to be a part of that because everything else is so focused around them, which is what we always want it to be. But we need them to see that we were like, no, this is our time,
Right.
maybe 2 hours in our
Mhm.
own home where we're going to eat dinner. We're going to play the music we want to play. We're going to pretend like we're at a nice
Yes.
restaurant, and we could have just done takeout, or, it didn't have to be a
Yeah.
meal. It was just about creating that space where we sat down, lit a candle, had reconnection. So for us, that has been a lot of it. And then the other thing is just sending each other like little notes throughout the day, whether it's a quick text of, I love
Mhm.
you, I miss you, I'm thinking about you, or you can do whatever, say whatever you want to say in your text, to remind your partner that you still want them and you're interested in them. Because I know for many years I was so exhausted by the end of the day, right? That the thought
Mhm.
of intimacy or anything was like, I just I can't have another person touch me, near me, and I just need space.
Yes.
But there were pockets in my day when I felt a little like, oh, this would be so, I'd love to spend some time with him right now. But by the time of the end of the day, that was depleted. So I would start to leave him a little note and just like let him know that I did
Mhm.
actually think about us together today. Or I really do, this is something that I actually do want. I am just physically not able to do that today or
By
tonight
9 o'clock at night.
by
Yes.
9 o'clock
I
at
love
night.
that.
So just little notes and reminders for each other that throughout your day. And now texting is so much easier where I used to do like
Yeah.
a little note by his bedside or, it's like at 12:15 today. It sounds kind of silly.
I was in the mood then.
I was in the mood
Yes.
then. But he said that that actually was really helpful for him because,
Right.
by the time 9 o'clock came, he was like, oh, I actually want to spend time with my wife. And he also wanted to be respectful of the fact that I was like,
Mhm.
not tonight, buddy. But then so it gets this cycle of
Right.
just, I am thinking of you. I do want to be with you. I really appreciate that time together. And you're not home right now. And I'm not, or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
But
And
it
men
just
can't read
sparks
our
that.
minds. So sometimes they
Right.
just need to hear that. They need to
They
hear
need to
that
hear
they
that.
are wanted
Yes.
and still appreciated. And oh, that's
Yes.
so true. I love that. I
Yeah.
just love too how you set such a good example for your kids about our relationship is important. I had
Mhm.
someone recently pregnant with a boy and she's very nervous. How do I raise him to be a gentleman? And I'm like, you will by example. Like your husband, the way he treats you will
Mhm.
show him how to treat other women. So I feel very lucky that I have a very respectful husband and he
Yeah.
shows the kids how to do that. But it is something that they learn from seeing. So I love that
Yeah.
you made your marriage a priority, even if it wasn't like we're taking this weekend getaway, we're having dinner at home together.
Right.
And
Right. And
I
now we
love
get
your
to do
father,
that.
so I want to talk to him.
Exactly. And now we get to do things like that, which is so exciting. But for so much of
Hmm.
our life, that was really not in the cards. And so it is, how do we prioritize and let our children know that this is so important, our bond and our relationship, because ultimately that is the foundation of this entire family. And so
Right.
if we let that slip and slide or we lose that connection, it's going to be really challenging to, like you were asking earlier, like how do we keep that going? That is
Hmm.
that nucleus space. And I remember early on, my husband would say to me, remember, these kids are all going to up and leave us one day, and they're going to be, I love her, I love him. And, we're going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, out of the picture.
Totally.
And it was so hard to hear him say that, but he had that awareness better than I did. And so
Hmm.
he was always like, so, he's like, and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be the one who's still here. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here. And it's very true, and he is the one who is, and I choose him and we choose each other to be that person who is still with
Hmm.
us when everything settles, when all the dust, when all the chaos, when all the good, when all the whatever it is that's the person I want to spend that with, but
Right.
prioritizing that throughout and those seasons when it was super hectic is part of that. So that at the long game, in the long run, you're still with that partner and it's not
Right.
suddenly, especially when they all go off to college or they all go off to school, you're looking at this person going,
Who are you?
who are you? What do you even like
Right.
anymore? What is
Right.
happening? Where if you're taking those moments and creating them and
Mhm.
scheduling them sometimes, then you keep that bond and that connection going
Right.
and
So
growing
putting in the work throughout
by little years.
these hard years right now, because I've thought about that too. I'm like, once the boys are gone, I'm like, it's going to be you and me. And so
Yeah.
it's like, instead of like, we're focusing so much on them and losing touch of us, I'm like, I want to still want you when the kids are gone. And how are we going to keep that going
And sharing
through all the
similar
chaos?
interests. Exactly. And and it doesn't we have very divergent interests, but the fact that we're open to each other's interests,
Mhm.
and being open to the fact that, the kind of movies he likes to watch versus the things that I maybe am interested in doing, and being
Yes.
able to sit with him and watch a movie that I'm like, this is not really my jam at all. But
Uh-huh.
again, this is what he's interested in. And
Right.
so taking that time to show him that and appreciate that with him and
Hmm.
looking at as this is kind of our, again, putting things in our little, like a nursing like a little piggy bank, right? And what are the little things we can keep adding in so that when the kids are up and gone, our piggy bank is still full and overflowing, and we're not just sitting here going, I don't know you, who
Yeah.
are
Who are
you,
you again?
who are you
Why did
again,
I choose you
what
30
did
some
you
years
do,
ago?
why are you in my bed, like all of that, it's
Hmm.
all a huge part of it,
Yeah.
for sure.
My husband's he's in the last couple years has gotten into running races. And so giving him the time, like he's going to be gone over Mother's Day weekend. And I was like, I know this is important to him and it makes him feel good and it's good for his mental health and stuff. And you know what? We'll make up Mother's Day a week later. So
Exactly.
knowing that I don't, like, I could be selfish and say it's Mother's Day. You're not going out of town, but I just kind of we'll do it another weekend. I know
It
this
is.
is good for you and you'll come home happy. That's my mom has told me before. My dad loved fishing. So he like his thing, he would save up his money and he would do his little fishing trips where he'd be gone for a couple days, like take a little boat out in the ocean. And she would always say like he had to do that. And actually, when he was gone, I had a little space, like a little me time. And so I
Yes.
kind of treated it as you're doing your fun thing, but I'm just, you come home happy, you've done your
Yeah.
little trip, and I had my little me time. So I kind of look at it like that, like, yeah, let him go do his race and feel good about
Yes.
himself.
And seeing what is that opportunity for you exactly to have your me time or to do
Mm,
something maybe you would differently do different on Mother's Day. Who knows? But then creating it to be, like you said, Mother's Day can be any day you want it to be.
right.
And all of it
Yeah.
can just,
And then when my
yeah.
girlfriends say, let's have a mom's weekend out, then I'll be like, great, remember that race you went on? I'm going to take my trip now. What would be your best advice for um, family, moms and dads who are kind of struggling right now with just being so busy with kids and feeling like we've lost touch, like we've lost connection? Is there a way
Mhm.
to get it back if you feel like,
I think there's definitely a way to get it back. And I think the first step though is that taking like self-care for you, figuring out what you need to catch your breath, figuring
okay,
out what you need to feel nourished, what you need to feel appreciated, what you require to feel seen and loved, and start enacting that for yourself and then share that in a space with your partner about what it
Mhm.
is you are requiring at this moment. Because if obviously, if you, as we know, if we aren't, fueling our own tank, then we can't possibly be the fuel for anybody else in our family. And we are, as women especially, constantly giving and giving and turning and turning. And the more depleted we become, it doesn't work. That's not how this is. So finding those key ways for you, and they might be teeny tiny steps, in the very beginning. What is something that brings you joy today, that got you excited today? And it doesn't have to cost anything. It might just be being able to, sit and read 10 minutes of a book, or, have a cup of coffee in silence or quiet, or playing your favorite music, whatever it is, little things to nourish you, I think is that very, very first step. And it has to be, because if we are not nourishing ourselves, we also can't then receive the nourishment that our partner might actually be trying to give us. Like you were saying
No.
earlier, that your partner, he was like, why didn't you ask me if I could have, worked from home? But if we're not even in that mindset of, oh,
Mhm.
wait, let me make sure that I'm being taken care of, let me make sure that I'm having these little moments, it's really hard to expect and think our partner is going to be able to do that for us. And I have found that oftentimes my partner was so ready and so willing, he just didn't actually know what I wanted
Yeah.
or where to step in. And so then being able to communicate that with that partner, being able to communicate that with the person who loves you, and being okay with asking for help, and
Mm.
and it not being anything other than, I just, need a breather in this moment. So I think that's the very, very first step. And then really just taking time to explore, like we were talking about earlier, creating those windows then together and nourishing the relationship together. And what does that look like? And how do you want to be with this person? Because there has been, things that we have had to shift over the years. Like, okay, now he's, home more. That was a huge thing when he retired from the Navy. And kind of like you were saying, I was like, isn't there a trip you're supposed to go on? Like, where,
I need
what is
my space.
happening? And he started working from home. And I was like, wow, I remember
You're
dreaming
always here.
dreamed of these days, but now you're here. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure how to do this. And so being gentle with yourself and trusting that you can pivot and work together, as long as you do decide this is what you want to do, and some of it is that choosing of, okay, I'm going to find a way to look at this with that curiosity and look at this as that wabi sabi weird thing that when he's home and he's on calls, he's crazy loud because he puts his noise canceling headphones in and he doesn't realize how loud he is. And,
Uh-huh.
and how do I want to respond to that? I get to decide how I respond to that thing that he is doing. And I get to decide, like you were saying, to put the dishes 2 minutes, rinse them, put them in the sink, maybe say something to him, and it changes from day to day, time to times. And there are days when I'm like, you need to go to the basement and have this call, please, because I'm on a call or I'm doing something and I can hear you all through the house. And he's like, oh, okay. Like it
Didn't even
just
realize it.
didn't even realize that. And I'm like, how does he not hear how loud he is? So I could keep that story playing in my head
Hmm.
where I could choose to respond differently and
Yeah.
either move where I am or say something to him or step out of the house for a little bit. And that's a great
Yeah.
time to go for a walk while
Right.
doing this
Right.
call.
Give me your meeting schedule so I know when to leave the house. But
Exactly.
I love that, like, you have been married for 35 years, so people think, oh, it's easy now because, like, but you're still,
Still
going through the
figuring it out.
motions. You're in a
Yep.
relationship. It's
Yep.
never going to be smooth sailing all the time.
Right. Right. And
But
I
even
don't
navigating those waters, like, is good for you. It's good for your relationship.
exactly. It keeps that stretchiness. It keeps for us some of that excitement. And I don't think we
Mhm.
ever, for us especially, we never wanted to feel like bored with each other or always just assuming that we know what the other one is always wanting or needing because we as humans are constantly, hopefully, changing and evolving our needs. I know what I need now is different than what I needed 10 years
Yeah.
ago versus 15 versus,
Mhm.
and so our relationship needs to evolve with that. And if we aren't creating space for that and curiosity around it, then we just assume, oh, it's going to look like this, or in 10 years, I'm going to be here and he's going to be there. And you really
Mhm.
don't know what life is going to throw at you. And so trusting that we'll figure this out. Okay, well, that was really messy. Wow, that was really clunky. We didn't do a very good job with that part. Okay, but let's do it again. And maybe we'll
Right.
look at it differently, or maybe, obviously you learn from those little bits, but it's also
Mhm.
okay that it's messy. And I think people want it to look so pretty all the time, and it just doesn't. It
Mhm.
doesn't. Still 35 years in, it's messy in some different ways, I think, but it's still messy. Like if you ask any of our grown children, they're like, yeah, and we don't have a problem with our children seeing the messiness because
Yes.
then they see how we come back together and they see us problem solving together and disagreeing
Mhm.
absolutely and not being on the same page every step of the way, and yet how do we then decide to still move forward, or how do we make these decisions? So it's giving them those tools of problem solving in a relationship when things are seemingly divergent or seemingly complete opposites, but yet we're choosing to come together. And sometimes I'm like, I need to take the lead on this. And sometimes he's like, I need to take the lead on this because he's more passionate about it or whatever it is. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I don't actually have as much skin in the game on this one. I don't agree with how you're doing it. But when it comes down to it, I'm okay with it going that way
Right.
and letting it go that way without then being like, I told you so when it goes wrong, which is a little tricky.
I want to say it, but I'm not
I
going to
want to say it,
compromise.
but
Compromise.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what got you to write the book and start the podcast. Because that's probably not
Mm.
something early in your marriage that you thought one day we're going to have a podcast all about relationships.
Yeah, never.
Where did that come from?
I honestly, it kind of started in 2020. In 2020 was going to be our 30th wedding
Okay.
anniversary. And I had this great vision of us going and renewing our vows on an Italian,
Oh,
side. And it was
sounds
just,
delightful.
it was glorious in my mind. And then, as we know,
Uh-huh.
nothing in that year that we anticipated. And I was actually working with a client who kept saying, Jodie, have you ever thought about you and Reggie like doing like a podcast? I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, why would I do that? Like, what did you, because sometimes I guess in conversation things would come up. And she just kind of put that little seed in. And then somewhere else, somebody said something, again, a friend who was like, have you guys ever thought about just like sitting down and talking and having it recorded? And our kids have even said that sometimes. So it just kind of kept coming and
Mhm.
percolating. And probably it was maybe almost a year later when I finally was like, all right, well, let's just see what this could look like. And I asked my husband, Reggie, and we are very we talk a lot to each other. So it was really like the idea was it's just going to be about conversations we've
Conversation.
had, experiences we've had. It wasn't meant to solve anything per se or
Mhm.
be like this, didactic how to do. It was just this is what has showed up in our life and how we have experienced
Mhm.
it and how we've moved through it. And so that was really how it started. And he was game for doing it, which was cool. But he was also like, I don't want to have like create a Q&A and I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm like, we're just going to sit
Gonna
down
talk.
and start talking. And sometimes I would have had something that week that came to
Mhm.
mind. And sometimes it was an argument that I had with him that I wanted to be like, we need to like hash this out a little further.
That is
Or,
brilliant. Oh,
and we would just then talk through it. Or sometimes it was something that happened when one of the kids, and we would just talk through in real time,
mhm.
what it was.
Modeling how relationships go. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so it really sort of just, and we would share some of our tips and tools, like the books because I'm the one who
Mhm.
does more of the like, let me read a book
Yeah.
how I can bring this into the relationship, which for a long time I was a little resentful of because I'm like, why isn't he reading the
I'm
book?
doing all the work. Yeah.
Doing all the work. But then I realized that's just kind of my jam. Like I actually enjoy that. And so as long
Mhm.
as he remains open to it, which he is, then I'm like, okay, I can be that torchbearer, if you will. This is like we have different roles, and this is one of them that I kind of lead the way when it's looking for things to, let's say, improve our marriage. And his part of that is that he's open to hearing it and let's give it a try. And I'm like, we
Mhm.
kind of came to that understanding. So that was how the podcast started. And then we he was the one who said, I think we should switch this to like, let's write a book. And I at the time was one of those where my plate was so full that I said, I don't even know like where we would start, how would we begin
Mhm.
this? And he said, okay, I'll take that on. And I'm like, great. And I kind of thought it might not ever come to fruition.
Surprise, surprise.
Then he did. He was like, listen, I've got this
Wow.
and this lined up and we could do it this way. And I was like, okay. And he shared with me that he really wanted to do the book because he felt that I had a lot more books in me to write. And if we did this together, it might just really
Get it in.
start that spark. And so
Mhm.
our book is very much based on, it is conversational and it is the same. It's kind of carries through our relationship, but it is that idea. If you were just sitting here in our home, at our kitchen table or out on our back deck with us,
Mhm.
conversations that we have and lessons we've learned and the way we have moved through things. And so that was really where the book kind of came out of the podcast
I love
experience.
that. I love that. I think sometimes it's so important to learn from seasoned and veteran moms and wives because you can get, the parenting experts and the, counselors all you want, but sometimes it's just other moms who have gone before you, other wives who have done it before you that you get the best wisdom from. So I just absolutely love what you're doing and everything that you've
Thank
shared.
you. I appreciate that.
Where, if we were looking for you, where could we find more about you?
Well, I'm on Facebook as Jodie Howard, and I'm on Instagram at essentially Jodie. And then our book is on Amazon. We were an
Okay.
Amazon bestseller, so you can
Cool.
search up.
I'm putting that in the show notes.
Yes,
And the
yes.
podcast, I'll put the podcast too, because I
And the
truly think
podcast is
it's good.
Higher Love. Yeah. And it's on all podcast channels. I mean, whether you're an Apple or Spotify or
There's a
Google,
million of them now. What
there's
are
a
the other
million
ones?
of
Yeah.
them. Yeah, it's out there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. This has been fun.
I love hearing Jodie's perspective so much. What stands out to me is that lasting love isn't accidental. It's intentional. It's built on making small daily choices. It's choosing connection when it would be easier to just shut down. It's staying curious. It's growing. It's inviting your partner to grow with you. Jodie reminds us that the love that we share is not just about surviving hard seasons, it's about letting those seasons shape you. Military life, special needs parenting, evolving identities, decades of change, none of it is automatically meant to build closeness, but intentionally it does. If this episode encouraged you, please send it to a friend, share it with your spouse, start a conversation tonight about re-choosing each other and what that looks like in your own home. And as always, I thank you for being here. Leave me a review. Come find me on Instagram because I love connecting with this community. And until next week's conversation, I want to remind you that everyone burns their first pancakes, so just keep flipping.